It was a single photograph, a ghost in the morning mist, a gray wolf staring directly into my lens, its eyes the color of the Wyoming winter. I'd taken it from the porch of my small, secluded cabin, the one I'd bought to escape the world. But in 1 week, that photo had been seen by 12 million people, National Geographic had called. Art galleries from New York to London were sending emails. And my quiet, hidden life was officially over. My name is Leah. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the invisible daughter, the quiet one who disappeared into the background while my younger sister Cassandra soaked up all the light in the room. Cassandra was a lifestyle influencer. Her life was a carefully curated collection of brunch photos, sponsored yoga retreats, and selfies in expensive clothes my parents had probably paid for. Every minor achievement of hers reaching 50,000 followers, getting a brand deal for a teeth-whitening kit, was celebrated with family dinners and gushing posts from my mother. My passion was different, quieter. I was a wildlife photographer. My world wasn't about perfectly filtered lattes. It was about sitting for 6 hours in the freezing cold, waiting for a bald eagle to take flight. It was about capturing the soul of a place in a single frame. To my family, it wasn't a career. It was a quirky hobby, something you did before you got a real job and settled down. I remember when I was 16, I won a small local photography contest. The prize was only $100, but it felt like the world to me. I rushed home, holding the certificate, my heart pounding with excitement. I found my parents in the living room cooing over a new designer purse Cassandra had bought with the allowance they gave her. I held out my certificate. I won, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My father glanced at it. That's nice, Leah. What's for dinner? My mother didn't even look up. Oh, honey, look at the stitching on this bag Cassandra found. Isn't it just exquisite? I learned to stop showing them my work after that. I learned to stop expecting them to care. My achievements were measured in silence, while Cassandra's were measured in applause. I became an expert at taking up less space, at making myself smaller so she could shine brighter. The family gatherings became a master class in irrelevance. People would ask Cassandra about her latest trip, her follower count, the new restaurant she'd reviewed. They'd ask my parents about their golf club, their recent vacation. They never asked me about the weeks I spent tracking mountain goats in Montana or the satisfaction of getting the perfect shot of an owl in flight. I was just Leah, the quiet girl with the camera, the one who didn't quite fit. So I saved. Every dollar from every print I sold, every freelance gig I took shooting weddings for people I didn't know. I saved for an escape, a place where the silence wasn't a punishment, but a choice. A place where my passion wasn't a hobby, but my entire world. That place was 40 acres of untamed land in Wyoming, with a tiny rundown cabin in the middle of it. It cost me everything I had. But it was mine. And now that quiet world had exploded. The very thing they'd dismissed for years, my quirky hobby, had suddenly made me visible to millions. But I knew deep down that in the eyes of my family, it wouldn't be my talent they saw. It would be my luck. And that luck, I had a feeling, was about to become very interesting to them. The final straw came 5 years ago. I'd been given a small solo exhibition at a local gallery in my hometown. It wasn't prestigious, just a tiny space run by a kind older woman who saw something in my work. For a month, 12 of my best prints would be on display. I was terrified and ecstatic. I called my mother my voice, shaking with an emotion I hadn't felt in years' hope. Mom, my first exhibition is opening. It's next Saturday. I'd love it if you all could come. Oh, honey, that's wonderful, she'd said, her voice distracted. We'll try to be there. Cassandra's excuse came via text a few days later. So, sorry, can't make the opening. Have a super important networking brunch I just can't miss. Break a leg? My parents' excuse came in a voicemail the morning of the event. Leah, something's come up with the golf club, my father's gruff voice said. Your mother and I have to attend a last-minute committee meeting. We're so sorry to miss it. We're proud of you. I stood in the gallery that night, surrounded by a handful of friends and a few curious strangers. I sold 2 prints. I should have been happy, but all I could feel was the echoing emptiness of my family's absence. It wasn't a last-minute meeting. It wasn't a super important brunch. It was a choice. And they had chosen once again that I wasn't important enough. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and drained my savings account to buy 40 acres of land in Wyoming. I'd only seen in pictures. It was an act of desperation, an escape. I was done trying to earn a place in their world. I was going to build my own. And now, sitting in the quiet of my cabin, the source of my escape had become the source of my success. The phone buzzed, dragging me from my thoughts. It was my mother, Patricia. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. I let it ring 4 times, then answered, bracing myself. Leah, honey, I've been trying to reach you. Her voice was unnaturally bright, dripping with a sweetness I hadn't heard since I was a child. We saw your picture, the one with the wolf. It's absolutely breathtaking. Your father and I are just so incredibly proud. I felt a familiar, stupid flicker of warmth in my chest. It's a strange thing, the psychology of being the overlooked child. For years, people wonder why you don't just leave, why you keep showing up for a family that barely acknowledges you. They see it as weakness, a lack of self-respect. But it's not that simple. It's more like living in a prison without bars. The walls aren't made of steel, but of hope. The hope that this time will be different. That this time they'll see you. That this time the approval you've been starved for will finally be granted. That hope is the invisible chain that keeps you in place. You learn not to rattle it too much. You learn that compliance is the price of admission, even if it's for a seat in the back row. Standing up for yourself, demanding more, it feels like a betrayal, not of them, but of that fragile hope. Because if you give up on the hope, what's left? Admitting you're truly alone. So you stay, you endure, not because you're weak, but because you're a survivor, and that invisible chain feels like the only connection you have. Thanks, Mom, I said, my voice carefully neutral. We were just talking, your father and I, she went on, ignoring my tone. And Cassandra and Jared, too. We feel terrible that we haven't been out to see your new place. We're all so busy, you know how it is. But with this wonderful news, we thought we absolutely have to come celebrate. An alarm bell went off in my head. Cassandra and her husband Jared. The whole family. We're thinking of driving out to Jackson this weekend, she said. We can take you to a proper celebration dinner. You deserve it. After all your hard work on your little hobby. My little hobby. Even now she couldn't help it. But the offer was there. The attention I had craved for so long, the chain of hope pulled tight. Okay, I heard myself say, this weekend is fine. Wonderful. We can't wait to see you, sweetie. We're all just bursting with pride. She hung up, and the silence of my cabin felt different now. It was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet before a storm. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that this wasn't about celebrating me. It was about something else entirely, and I was about to find out what. The restaurant was the kind of place my family loved and I hated. Dark wood, gleaming silverware, and starched white tablecloths that felt like an accusation. It was the most expensive restaurant in Jackson. the kind of place where conversations were held in a low, polite hum, and the wine list was thicker than a novel. They were already there when I arrived, seated at a round table in the center of the room holding court. My mother, Patricia, saw me first, and her face lit up with a brilliant fake smile. "Leah, there you are," she called out, a little too loudly. She stood and pulled me into a stiff, perfumed hug. We were just telling everyone how proud we are. My daughter, the famous photographer. Famous. A week ago I was just Leah the weirdo who lived in a cabin. Now I was famous. "It's beautiful, honey," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "All of it, the success, the attention. We always knew you had it in you." That was the first lie of the evening. They had never known. They had never even looked. My father, Frank, grunted in agreement. "Must be nice, all that money rolling in from one picture. Some people have all the luck." Luck, not skill, not years of patience and practice. Just blind luck. I smiled weakly. "It's been overwhelming." "You have to tell me about your engagement numbers," Cassandra chirped, leaning forward with an intensity that was almost predatory. "What's your share rate? Did you get a traffic spike to your website? We should talk about monetizing your platform. You could do brand deals. Outdoor gear, maybe. You have a real opportunity here." She wasn't asking about the wolf. She wasn't asking about the feeling of capturing that once-in-a-lifetime shot. She was asking about the metrics, the algorithm, the money. She saw my art as a business opportunity, a sudden, unexpected asset. Her husband, Jared, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. He had the sharp, calculating eyes of a man who sees the world as a series of transactions. "It's an incredible story," he said smoothly. "The girl who escapes to the wilderness and finds fame. People eat that up." They spent the next hour talking at me. My mother recounted a version of my life story to Jared's parents, who were also there, a version where my artistic temperament was a charming eccentricity they had always nurtured. My father asked 3 times how much a major magazine would pay for a cover photo. Cassandra kept circling back to follower counts and brand strategy. Through it all, I felt that old, familiar invisibility creeping back in. I was the subject of conversation, the reason they were all gathered at this expensive table, but I wasn't really there. They weren't talking to me. They were talking about a version of me they had just invented Leah the surprise success story. Leah the lucky one. Leah the potential asset. The waiter refilled my wine glass for the 3rd time. I took a sip, the expensive liquid tasting like ash in my mouth. They had no idea who I was. And the worst part, they didn't care. They only cared about what my newfound success could do for them, how it reflected on them. Then Jared, who had been watching me with that unnerving stillness all evening, leaned forward slightly. "So, that wolf," he said, his voice casual. "You took that right on your property, didn't you?" The view of the Tetons in the background was just perfect. The table went quiet for a beat. The question was innocent enough, but the way he said it, the specific focus on the property, it sent a chill down my spine. The phony celebration was over. The real meeting was about to begin. "Yes," I said, my voice flat. "I took it from my porch. The Tetons are in my backyard." Jared smiled, a slow, satisfied spreading of his lips. "Incredible. The land itself is the asset. You realize that, don't you? That photo didn't just go viral. It put your little piece of Wyoming on the map." My little piece of Wyoming. It wasn't little to me. It was everything. "He's right, Leah," my mother chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "You have to be smart about this. An opportunity like this doesn't come along twice." "You could create a whole brand around it," Cassandra added, her eyes gleaming. "The wolf cabin. You could do workshops, sell prints, Maybe even get a sponsorship from a camera company. The narrative is perfect. The narrative? The story? It was always about the story they could sell, never about the life I was living. Jared held up a hand, silencing his wife. That's all small-time thinking. Leah, we've been talking as a family and we want to help you. He paused for dramatic effect. We want to make you an offer. I looked at him, then around the table. My mother was nodding encouragingly. My father looked on with a rare flicker of interest. They were a team. This was a business meeting, and I was the mark. We'd like to buy your land, Jared said. We'll give you a very generous price, $250,000. Cash. $250,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen in one place. It was enough to buy a real house, a new car, to live without worrying about every bill. It was a life raft, and it was an insult. You could move back to civilization, my mother said softly. Buy a nice condo. We could see you more often. That money would give you real security, my father added, not just hoping to sell a few pictures. That was it. That was the moment everything snapped into focus. They didn't see me as a successful artist who had just created a world-renowned photograph. They saw me as the same charity case I'd always been, a girl who got lucky, a girl who stumbled into a winning lottery ticket and was too stupid to know how to cash it in. They thought my life's work, my sanctuary, my soul's home, was just a commodity to be flipped for a profit. They were offering me money to erase the one thing that was truly mine. I looked at Jared at his confident, predatory smile. I looked at Cassandra already calculating her cut of my story. I looked at my parents who saw this not as a betrayal, but as a sensible business transaction. No, I said. The single word dropped into the quiet hum of the restaurant like a stone. Jared's smile faltered. I'm sorry. What? No, I repeated, my voice stronger now. The land is not for sale. My father scoffed. Don't be sentimental, Leah. This is a business opportunity. It's not a business opportunity, I said, looking him directly in the eye. It's my home. It's where I do my work. It's where I took that picture. It's not for sale. Leah, be realistic, my mother pleaded. What are you going to do with 40 acres of land? You're all alone out there. Take the money. Be practical. Being practical is what got me here. I said, the words tasting like freedom in my mouth. Being practical was saving every dollar while you all went on vacations. Being practical was choosing my passion over your approval. This land is the result of that, and I'm not selling it. Cassandra stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. But it's just dirt. You could do so much more with the money. You don't get it, I said. And for the first time, I didn't say it with sadness. I said it with clarity. You never have. I stood up my chair, scraping against the floor. The polite hum of the restaurant had stopped. People were watching. Thank you for dinner, I said, my voice steady. It's been illuminating. I turned and walked away, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence, the check for their expensive meal still sitting on the table, a problem I had no intention of solving for them. The battle line had been drawn, and I had finally chosen my side. I didn't make it to my car. Jared was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against the hood of my beat-up Subaru, his arms crossed. The rest of them, my mother, my father, Cassandra, stood a few feet behind him, a silent, disapproving wall. That was quite a performance, Jared said, his voice dangerously smooth. I'm leaving, I said, fumbling for my keys. No, you're not. Not until we have a real conversation. We just had one. I said no. He pushed himself off my car and took a step toward me. He was taller than I remembered, more imposing. You don't understand what you're saying no to, Leah. You're being emotional. You're thinking like an artist. You need to think like a businesswoman. My home is not a business. He laughed a short, humorless sound. Everything is a business. You just don't know the rules of the game. Then I'm glad I'm not playing. I tried to sidestep him to get to my car door, but he moved to block my path. Listen to him, Leah, my mother said, her voice pleading. He's trying to help you. Help me by taking the one thing that mattered to me. You're making a mistake, Jared said, his voice dropping. A very, very big mistake. The only mistake was thinking you all might actually be proud of me. I shot back, my anger finally boiling over. The only mistake was hoping for 1 second that you saw me as anything other than a problem to be managed or an opportunity to be exploited. That's when he snapped. The smooth corporate mask fell away, and for the first time I saw the raw, ugly greed underneath. You want to know what this is really about, he snarled, pulling a folded piece of paper from his suit pocket. You want to see the big picture you're too naive to understand? He unfolded it and slammed it onto the hood of my car. It was a map, a detailed professional survey map of the entire region around my land. He pointed a finger at a small square plot colored in red. That's you, he said. That's your pathetic little 40 acres of wilderness. Then he circled his finger around it, around a much larger, sprawling area, colored in green. And this, he said, his voice thick with a rage. I didn't understand. This is everything else. 500 acres of prime, undeveloped land, the last of its kind, this close to the national park. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with intensity. I've spent the last 18 months putting together a deal to acquire that green parcel. 18 months of negotiating with investors, getting permits, creating a plan. We're going to build a resort there, Leah, a 5-star exclusive members-only luxury wilderness retreat. We're talking $100 million valuation. I stared at the map, at the small red square. That was my home, completely surrounded by the green monster of his ambition. There's just one problem, he continued, tapping his finger on my plot of land again and again. The only access road to the entire 500 acres runs right through your property. There's no other way in. Mountains on one side, a federal preserve on the other. Your land is the gate. Your land is the key. And in that moment I understood. It wasn't about the wolf. It wasn't about my photography. It wasn't even about family jealousy. It had never been about me at all. This was a corporate takeover, and I was just a minor obstacle. We thought you'd be reasonable, he said, his voice laced with contempt. We thought we'd make you a generous offer. You'd take the money, and we'd all move on. But you had to be difficult. You had to be sentimental about a patch of dirt. I looked at my family. They weren't shocked. They weren't surprised by any of this. They had known all along. Their feigned pride, the celebratory dinner, the offer, it was all a calculated performance to get what they wanted. Your fame was just a convenient excuse, Jared spat. A story to frame the offer. But this is the bottom line. You are standing in the way of a multi-million-dollar deal. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was war. And I had just become the sole defender of a tiny red square against a vast green empire. So I'll ask you one more time, Jared said, leaning in, close his voice a low threat. Are you going to be smart and sell us the land? I stared at the map, at the little red box that was my life, and all the hurt I'd been carrying for years turned into something else, something cold and hard and clear. It all made a sick kind of sense. My luck? My opportunity? The sudden suffocating pride from a family who hadn't acknowledged a single achievement in my 32 years of life. You lied to me, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the parking lot's silence. All of you. My mother stepped forward, her hand outstretched. Leah, we were going to tell you. We just wanted to present it in the right way. The right way, I laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You mean the way that got you what you wanted? You didn't come to celebrate me. You came to acquire an asset. I was just a negotiation you had to get through. That's not fair, Cassandra snapped, her perfect influencer mask finally cracking. Jared's project would benefit the whole family. You're being selfish, thinking only about your little cabin and your weird hobby. My weird hobby just made me more famous than your entire career. I shot back and I saw her flinch. Enough, my father's voice boomed. You're throwing away a fortune over a grudge. $250,000 is more money than you'll ever see from taking pictures of squirrels. Take the deal. Stop being so damn emotional. I looked at them, then really looked at them. And for the first time, I didn't see the powerful, confident people who had made me feel small my entire life. I saw the panic in my mother's eyes, the desperate need for this deal to go through. I saw the tremor in my father's voice, the anger that came from a place of fear, not strength. I saw the way Cassandra's perfectly manicured hands were clenched into fists at her sides. They weren't angry because I was being difficult. They were terrified because I was being immovable. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. This resort wasn't just another project for them. It was everything. And I was the only thing standing in their way. The realization was like a switch flipping in my soul. The hurt was still there, a deep, ancient ache. But the fear was gone. The price just went up, I said quietly. Jared's head snapped toward me. What did you say? You heard me. You want my land. Fine. But it's not $250,000. It's not even $1 million. The price is an apology, a real one. For every ignored achievement, for every dismissive comment, for every time you made me feel like I was invisible, you want my land. You're going to have to earn it with the one thing you've never been willing to give me: respect. For a second, there was stunned silence. Then Jared started to laugh. It was a cold, ugly sound. You think you're in a position to negotiate. You think you hold any cards here. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. We'll get that land, Leah, one way or another. We can drag you through court for years. We can claim eminent domain through the county. We have lawyers who will bury you in paperwork until you can't afford to fight anymore. You think your little photo makes you powerful. You have no idea what real power is. That was it. The final thread of hope I didn't even know I was still holding on to finally snapped. You're right, I said, my voice as cold as his. I don't know about your kind of power, the kind that bullies and threatens and takes, but I know about mine. I looked past him, at my mother, my father, my sister. You can have your money. You can have your resort. But you will never, ever have my home. And you will never have me again. I finally pushed past Jared, got to my car, and jammed the key in the ignition. They didn't try to stop me this time. They just stood there watching me, a united front of disappointment and fury. As I drove away, I saw them in my rearview mirror, huddled together, already plotting their next move. The battle wasn't over. It had just officially been declared. I drove the hour and a half back to my cabin in a daze. The anger from the parking lot confrontation had burned itself out, leaving a hollow, vibrating space in my chest. One way or another. Jared's words echoed in my head. They weren't just going to let this go. I knew that. My family didn't lose. They didn't accept no. They simply found another way to get what they wanted. I spent the next 2 days in a state of high alert. My phone, always in my pocket. my ears straining at the sound of every car that passed on the distant gravel road. I expected lawyers. I expected official-looking letters. I expected another ambush. What I didn't expect was for the attack to come from Cassandra. It was Tuesday night. My phone buzzed with a message from a friend. "Leah, have you seen this?" "You need to." There was a link. My finger trembled as I clicked it. My sister's face filled the screen. She was sitting in her perfectly minimalist, all-white living room. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she was clutching a mug like a lifeline. It was a masterful performance of a woman on the verge of collapse. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this," she began, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. "But my family is going through something, and I feel like I have to speak my truth." I felt my stomach clench. She didn't mention the resort. She didn't mention the map, or the money, or the threats. Instead, she spun a beautiful, tragic story. A story about a family who had always supported each other, who had a dream to build a legacy, a project that would secure their parents' retirement and bring prosperity to a small community. And then she talked about me. "My sister, Leah," she said, pausing to take a shaky breath, a single tear tracing a perfect path down her cheek. "She's always been different, more artistic, more sensitive, and we've always loved her for that. But recently she's had this incredible stroke of luck with her photography, and it's changed her." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes pleading. We tried to celebrate with her. We tried to guide her, to help her make smart decisions with this sudden opportunity. But she's pushing us away. She's holding our family's entire future hostage, out of what I can only guess is jealousy or spite. The words were poison-tipped darts, each one crafted for maximum damage. Sensitive, fragile, jealousy, spite. She painted me as an unstable, vindictive artist who couldn't handle success, someone who would burn her own family's future to the ground for a moment in the spotlight. "All we're asking," she finished, her voice dropping to a heartbroken whisper, "is for her to be reasonable, to think about someone other than herself for once. Is that too much to ask?" The video ended. I sat there in the silence of my cabin, the glow of the screen illuminating my stunned face. She hadn't just lied. She had weaponized my entire life against me, twisting my quiet nature into instability, my independence into selfishness. By the next morning, the video had over 1 million views. The comments section was a battlefield. Her followers, the ones who saw her as a beacon of aspirational living, rushed to her defense. "Your sister sounds toxic. Stay strong, Cassandra." Another wrote, "Family can be so cruel when they're jealous of your success." But then another narrative began to emerge, quieter at first, then louder. "What's the other side of this story?" one person commented. Another asked, "She's being really vague about this family project. What exactly is she asking her sister to give up?" And another more pointedly, "Wait, isn't her sister the photographer who took that amazing wolf? Picture. The one who lives off-grid. Something about this story doesn't add up." I watched the digital war unfold from my cabin, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. Cassandra was replying to the sympathetic comments, thanking people for their support, adding fuel to the fire with vague allusions to my difficult past. She was building an army, but she'd made a critical mistake. In her rush to paint herself as the victim, she'd left out all the details. And in the vacuum of those missing facts, suspicion was beginning to grow. She thought she was controlling the narrative, but she had just lit a match, and she had no idea how big the fire was about to get. The live Q&A was Cassandra's idea, of course. Buoyed by the initial wave of support, she announced she wanted to speak directly to her community and answer the questions everyone was asking. It was scheduled for Friday evening. She went live from her pristine living room, the camera angle perfectly framing her against a backdrop of white bookshelves and artfully placed plants. She wore a simple cream-colored sweater, her hair was a little messy, and she held a large ceramic mug. She looked like the girl next door, heartbroken and vulnerable. For the first 20 minutes, it was exactly what she wanted. The chat was a river of heart emojis and supportive messages. Her moderator fed her softball questions from loyal followers. "How are you holding up, Cass? We love you. What can we do to support your family?" She answered them with a practiced fragility. "It's been so hard," she'd say, her voice catching. "You never expect something like this from your own sister. We're just trying to hold together. And hope she comes to her senses." But then the tide started to turn. A few pointed questions slipped through. The first one came from a user named Wyoming Wild. "Can you explain what the family project is? Your video was very vague. What are you actually asking your sister to give up?" Cassandra's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. "Oh, it's a private family matter," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's really about securing our parents' future." "It's complicated." She tried to pivot, but what's more important is the emotional side of this. It didn't work. The question had opened a crack in her perfect narrative, and people started to push. The chat began to move faster. Another user, TruthSeeker82, posted a comment that got 1,000 likes in under a minute. Public zoning records show a large resort development proposal for that area, filed by a Jared M. "Is your husband involved? Are you asking your sister to give up her home for a commercial real estate deal?" The dam broke. The moderator couldn't delete the comments fast enough. The feed was flooded with questions. Is this about a resort? Why did you lie and say it was just a family project? So you want her land for a hotel? Cassandra's composure crumbled. Her face, which had been a mask of gentle sorrow, was now flushed with panic. "No, that's not the whole story," she stammered. "You don't understand. It's not just a hotel. It's an opportunity for everyone." She was losing control. Her eyes darted back and forth, reading the relentless stream of accusations. The final blow came from a simple, direct question. Why is your family's financial future her responsibility? Cassandra snapped. The mask of the poised, heartbroken influencer fell away, revealing the petulant, entitled woman I had known my whole life. "Because it's not just her home," she shouted, her voice shrill. "It's a worthless piece of land that's blocking a multi-million-dollar opportunity that would secure our parents' retirement. Is it so selfish to ask her to think about the family for once, instead of her stupid wolves?" The moment the words left her mouth, she froze. Her eyes widened in horror. She knew what she'd done. The chat exploded. She admitted it. "Wow, worthless piece of land. The same land that took the photo you're all profiting from? Stupid wolves. This is about money. It was always about money." I watched from my cabin, my hand covering my mouth. I had expected them to fight dirty, but I had never expected this. A public self-immolation, broadcast live, to over 50,000 people. She tried to backtrack her voice, a panicked squeak. "That's not what I meant. I'm just upset. You're twisting my words." But it was too late. The truth was out there, captured in 1,000 screen recordings that were already spreading across the internet like wildfire. She stared at the screen for another 10 seconds, her face a picture of pure, unadulterated panic. Then the screen went black. The live stream was over. She had walked into her own trap and slammed the door shut behind her, and in doing so she had just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. The screen went black, but the silence that followed was louder than any of Cassandra's shouting. I sat there, in my cabin, the glow of the laptop, casting long shadows across the room. I should have felt triumphant. I should have been celebrating, but I wasn't. I felt like a biologist who had just witnessed a predator so confident and fearsome suddenly stumble and reveal a fatal weakness. It wasn't victory I felt. It was a cold clinical understanding. For years I'd wondered why my family was the way it was, why they were so obsessed with appearances, so terrified of anything that didn't fit their perfect image. Watching my sister's digital self-destruction, I finally understood. There's a fundamental difference between having and being. My family's entire world was built on having the right house in the right neighborhood, having the right friends, having the right car, and most importantly, having a daughter like Cassandra, whose life was a collection of things they could show off. Their status was a beautiful, elaborate shell, but it was rented, and the rent was paid every single day with money with the approval of others, and with the desperate constant performance of perfection. When that performance was threatened, when the applause faltered, the shell cracked. I, on the other hand, had built my life on being patient, being observant, being the kind of person who could spend 8 hours in the snow to earn a single perfect frame. My worth wasn't tied to an address or a follower count. It was in my skills, in my knowledge, in my resilience. It wasn't rented, it was forged. When I refused to sell my land, I didn't just threaten their multi-million-dollar resort deal. I threatened their very sense of self. To them, my land was just another thing to have. They couldn't understand that for me, it was a part of who I am. When Cassandra screamed that it was a worthless piece of land, she was revealing her entire philosophy. If you can't monetize it, if you can't post it for social credit, it has no value. Her meltdown wasn't a simple slip of the tongue. It was the sound of a hollow structure collapsing. It was the shriek of someone realizing the beautiful shell they lived in was empty and that a storm was coming. She wasn't just losing a business deal. She was losing the only version of herself she knew how to be. And as I sat there in the quiet of my cabin, the distant Wyoming mountains standing silent against the starry sky, the feeling of vindication finally faded. It was replaced by something else, something I never expected to feel for my sister or for any of them. It was pity, a profound and empty pity for people who had spent their entire lives trying to have a perfect life without ever stopping to consider what it meant to simply be a good person. They had mistaken the shell for the soul. And now the shell was breaking, and there was nothing inside. The 60 seconds that ended an empire. That's what they called it online. Cassandra's meltdown wasn't just a clip. It became a cultural moment. It was replayed on a loop on news channels, dissected by commentary YouTubers, and turned into 1,000 brutal memes. The internet, with its swift and merciless judgment, had become the jury, and the verdict was unanimous. The comments were a masterclass in public evisceration. Wait, so she's mad her sister won't give up her home for a luxury resort? The entitlement is staggering. Another reads, "Stupid wolves, she's angry at the very thing that made her sister's photo famous in the first place." My sister, who had built her entire career on a carefully constructed image of authenticity and aspirational perfection, was now the poster child for everything people hated about influencer culture. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. I learned about it in pieces through messages from friends who were watching the spectacle unfold. Jared's investors, the ones he'd spent 18 months courting, saw the PR nightmare for what it was. They pulled out, all of them. The $100 million dream of a luxury resort evaporated overnight, leaving Jared with nothing but broken contracts and a reputation in tatters. I imagined him in his expensive office, the grand map of his ambition now just a useless piece of paper. For Cassandra, the consequences were more personal. The brands that had paid her thousands to promote their products, the wellness teas, the sustainable fashion, the minimalist furniture dropped her. Her follower count, the metric by which she measured her own worth, plummeted. She was losing them by the tens of thousands every hour. Her perfectly curated world was burning, and all she had done was tell the truth for 60 seconds. Even my parents weren't immune. Their friends in their wealthy, insular community had seen the video. They'd heard the story. The whispers at the country club, the canceled dinner invitations, their carefully protected social standing was crumbling. They had hitched their wagon to Jared's ambition and Cassandra's fame, and now that wagon was careening off a cliff. I watched it all from the quiet of my cabin, a digital spectator, to the demolition of my own family. And through the storm of notifications, the screenshots, the forwarded links, one quiet notification appeared in my inbox. A different kind of email. The subject line was simple: regarding your property in Jackson. It was from a woman named Dr. Alana Reed, the executive director of the Sierra Ridge Conservancy, one of the largest and most respected conservation funds in the country. Dear Miss Leah, she wrote, we have been following the incredible story of your photograph and the light it has shined on the unique ecosystem in your region. Our organization has been working for years to establish a protected wildlife corridor to connect the national park to the surrounding wilderness, and it has come to our attention that your 40-acre parcel is a critical piece of that corridor. My heart hammered against my ribs. We are not developers, the email continued. Our interest is purely in preservation. We would like to make you an offer to acquire your land at a price significantly above market value with the sole purpose of absorbing it into the Conservancy. It would be protected forever as a sanctuary for the very wildlife you have so beautifully captured. I read the email 3 times. They had seen my land as a barrier to their fortune. The Conservancy saw it as a gateway to preservation. They had wanted to silence the wilderness. And now the wilderness was speaking back. I sat with that email for a full day. I read it, then walked the perimeter of my land, my hand trailing over the rough bark of the pine trees. I looked at the mountains, the same ones that had served as the backdrop for a life-changing photograph. My family had seen this place as a barrier, a red square on a map that was in the way of their ambition. They wanted to pave it, build on it, turn its wildness into a commodity. The Conservancy saw it as a bridge, a vital link in a chain of wilderness that stretched for hundreds of miles. They didn't want to own it to conquer it. They wanted to own it to protect it. They saw what I saw. The decision when it came wasn't a decision at all. It was an affirmation. It was the only choice that made sense. I called Dr. Reed the next morning. My voice was steady. I accept your offer, I said, on one condition. Name it, she replied, her voice warm. I want it to be named the Gray Wolf Sanctuary, I said, in honor of the one who started all of this. There was a pause, and then she laughed, a genuine, happy sound. I think that's the best condition we've ever received. Welcome to the Conservancy, Leah. The sale was quiet, professional, and respectful. There were no threats, no manipulations, just paperwork signatures and a quiet sense of purpose. The amount they paid was, as promised, significantly more than what Jared had offered. Enough that I would never have to worry about money again. But looking at the number in my bank account, I didn't feel a thrill of wealth. I felt the weight of responsibility. This money wasn't a windfall. It was a seed. It was the result of a wild creature's trust, a moment of connection, and the courage to protect it. And I knew with absolute clarity what I had to do with it. I spent the next month working with lawyers and financial advisors. It wasn't for a new house or a fancy car. It was for something else. On a Tuesday afternoon, a new website went live. It was simple, elegant, with my wolf photograph as the banner. The title read, The Leah Wild Legacy Fund. The mission statement was short: to provide equipment grants and mentorship to young, under-resourced wildlife photographers, because every voice that speaks for the wild deserves to be heard. I thought about myself at 16, saving up for months to buy a second-hand lens. I thought about the years I spent using outdated gear, wishing I could afford the tools that would allow me to capture the images I saw in my mind. I thought about all the other Leahs out there, kids with a passion for nature, but without the resources to pursue it. This fund wasn't charity. It was an investment. An investment in the next generation of storytellers who would fight for the wild places. My family's legacy, I realized, was one of taking. Taking land, taking money, taking dignity. They had tried to build an empire on a foundation of greed. And in the end, that empire was nothing but a pile of digital rubble. My legacy would be different. It would be one of giving back to the wilderness that had saved me, and giving a chance to others who, like me, had found their voice in its silence. I didn't need a luxury resort to leave my mark on the world. All I needed was my camera, a cause I believed in, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my little red square on the map was now and would be forever a sanctuary. I sat with that email for a full day. I read it, then walked the perimeter of my land, my hand trailing over the rough bark of the pine trees. I looked at the mountains, the same ones that had served as the backdrop for a life-changing photograph. My family had seen this place as a barrier, a red square on a map that was in the way of their ambition. They wanted to pave it, build on it, turn its wildness into a commodity. The Conservancy saw it as a bridge, a vital link in a chain of wilderness that stretched for hundreds of miles. They didn't want to own it to conquer it. They wanted to own it to protect it. They saw what I saw. The decision, when it came, wasn't a decision at all. It was an affirmation. It was the only choice that made sense. I called Dr. Reed the next morning. My voice was steady. I accept your offer, I said, on one condition. Name it, she replied, her voice warm. I want it to be named the Gray Wolf Sanctuary, I said, in honor of the one who started all of this. There was a pause, and then she laughed, a genuine, happy sound. I think that's the best condition we've ever received. Welcome to the Conservancy, Leah. The sale was quiet, professional, and respectful. There were no threats, no manipulations, just paperwork signatures, and a quiet sense of purpose. The amount they paid was, as promised, significantly more than what Jared had offered. Enough that I would never have to worry about money again. But looking at the number in my bank account, I didn't feel a thrill of wealth. I felt the weight of responsibility. This money wasn't a windfall. It was a seed. It was the result of a wild creature's trust, a moment of connection, and the courage to protect it. And I knew with absolute clarity what I had to do with it. I spent the next month working with lawyers and financial advisors. It wasn't for a new house or a fancy car. It was for something else. On a Tuesday afternoon, a new website went live. It was simple, elegant, with my wolf photograph as the banner. The title read, The Leah Wild Legacy Fund. The mission statement was short: to provide equipment grants and mentorship to young, under-resourced wildlife photographers, because every voice that speaks for the wild deserves to be heard. I thought about myself at 16, saving up for months to buy a second-hand lens. I thought about the years I spent using outdated gear, wishing I could afford the tools that would allow me to capture the images I saw in my mind. I thought about all the other Leahs out there, kids with a passion for nature, but without the resources to pursue it. This fund wasn't charity. It was an investment in the next generation of storytellers who would fight for the wild places. My family's legacy, I realized, was one of taking land, taking money, taking dignity. They had tried to build an empire on a foundation of greed, and in the end, that empire was nothing but a pile of digital rubble. My legacy would be different. It would be one of giving back to the wilderness that had saved me, and giving a chance to others who, like me, had found their voice in its silence. I didn't need a luxury resort to leave my mark on the world. All I needed was my camera, a cause I believed in, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my little red square on the map was now and would be forever a sanctuary. The first grant from the Leah Wild Legacy Fund went to a 17-year-old girl from rural Utah who submitted a portfolio of stunning landscape photos taken on a cracked smartphone. We sent her a full professional camera kit and a scholarship for a summer photography workshop. Her thank you letter, handwritten and tear-stained, is framed on the wall of my new office in Jackson. It's been a year. I stand on what used to be my land now, the Gray Wolf Sanctuary. A group of college students, the first recipients of our mentorship program, are scattered around me, their lenses pointed toward the tree line, their faces a mixture of concentration and awe. I'm teaching them about light, about patience, about how to see the story the wilderness is telling. I don't think about my family much anymore. The news finds me sometimes through the grapevine. Jared's resort deal collapsed into a mountain of debt and lawsuits. Cassandra deleted her social media and is reportedly working a quiet office job somewhere. The spotlight she craved, now a source of shame. My parents sold their large house and downsized their social standing, fractured. They made their choices. They are living with the consequences. My story in the end wasn't just about a viral photo or a family's downfall. It was about finding my own wilderness. And now I want to speak to you. This is a letter for those who have always felt like they were on the outside looking in the ones who grew up in the shadow of a golden child. To the one whose achievements were met with polite nods, while others were met with parades. To the one who learned to make yourself smaller, quieter, to take up less space because you were taught that your needs were an inconvenience. I want you to hear this. Your worth is not a negotiation. It is not determined by their applause or their attention. You do not need their permission to be proud of yourself. You do not need an invitation to celebrate your own life. For years, you have been waiting for a seat at a table where you were never truly welcome. The greatest act of rebellion, the most profound form of revenge, is not to demand a seat. It is to build your own table, and then build a bigger one, and invite everyone else who has been left out. Your passion is not a quirky hobby. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. Your quiet strength is not a weakness. It is your power. The world is starved for authentic voices, for people who create from the heart, not for the applause. So find your own wilderness, whether it's a cabin in the mountains, a canvas in a small apartment, or a business plan scribbled on a napkin. Find that one thing that is yours, and yours alone, and protect it. Nurture it. Let it become the legacy they never saw coming, because the most beautiful revenge is not their destruction. It is your creation.